Why do brown shows love setting our own people back?
I am not happy to report that this is a stereotypical slop fest where the writing is offensive and cringy at points. Just a few examples off the top of my head. If you're telling me that an Indian family in 2024 is immigrating from India to America and they hop off the plane looking like this with thick, terrible accents, it just does not make any computable sense. In which case, I will not be supporting and watching this, but you can if you want to.
Unfortunately, this isn't a review because I only watched 2 episodes of this and I could not bring myself to watch any more, which I found today to watch the series. I was just very disappointed because it was just a stereotypical cringe fest. The Pradeeps reminded me a lot of the comedic dialogue in Never Have I Ever and Velma, which was not good because the jokes that are made in both of those shows talk about being Indian, but in a very comedic, stereotypical sense. It doesn't really take the struggles of being an immigrant or, being Indian in a Western country very seriously. It just seems like we're making fun of it, and that's what I felt like while watching the Pradeeps of Pittsburgh. And boys, that is really sad to see a project that has the same comedic tone that I feel like Boljit had in the 2000s that we grew up with, and we now all don't like. So when I see it again on screen now in 2024, it's so—
This is one of the most stereotypical and offensive shows I've seen. Now, representation-wise, this was absolutely abhorrent. Some parts of the narrative for the show was kind of offensive, I didn't find majority of the jokes to be funny. In fact, I thought it was kind of stereotypical and just very bland. Even people have taken to Twitter talking about how it enforces racial stereotypes and hints of xenophobia.
Okay, so I was scrolling through the ABC Desi subreddit, as you do, looking for some new video ideas, and I saw that the top poster that day was Pradeeps of Pittsburgh cancelled after 1 season, with the Reddit user writing, "Good riddance, this show was the absolute worst form of representation for South Asians." I mean, this guy's acting like Baljit and Raj from The Big Bang Theory aren't South Asian anymore, and somehow they did the Michael Jackson switch up. But I kept reading the post and the thread, and it seems like the majority of the comments on this post agreed on how whack and terrible this show is, or should I say was, because the Pradeeps of Pittsburgh got cancelled after just 1 season on Amazon Prime Video, and they are not going to continue with the show. So after seeing all of the negative reviews and press, I made the decision to actually go out and watch this show for myself, to see why it was cancelled and whether or not it really is the absolute worst form of rep for South Asians. And whether or not this was a good decision is up for debate, because this show is definitely one of the shows of all time. But anyway, I actually remember when the trailer for this show came up on my recommended page, and just seeing the title and the thumbnail of the trailer actually made me think this show was like a parody, to be honest. I thought it was just a spoof of an Indian family, maybe it's like an old Lily Singh video or something. But it turns out that this TV show is backed by the mighty Amazon Prime and it's on their streaming service. And I looked at the cast and was like, I recognize some people from here. Sindhu V is in this show, and I've seen some of her comedy on Instagram and she's been going viral recently. Naveen Andrews is in this show and he's been involved in some pretty big things. So I'm like, cool, this show is legit. This is not some small scale production. But I still chose not to watch the trailer at that time because it still didn't really appeal to me. And had I watched the trailer at that time, then I would have known what type of show this was going to be. So fast forward to last week, just so I'm about to see what this show is about, I decided to look at the reviews of the show. Keep in mind, this show came out in October, so it's been out for a while now. So clearly I'm very late to the party. Anyway, this show has a 6.2 on IMDb. And yes, IMDb is the only place to trust for film reviews, by the way. Let's just get that clear. But a 6.2, it's not that bad. I mean, it's not good either, but it's a 6.2. That's like getting 62% on a test. I mean, if you got that in an Indian household, you'll probably get kicked out. But again, 6.2 for a TV show, it's not terrible. It's one of those Netflix and chill type of shows. And one of those shows where they'll ask if you're still watching on the TV prompt. But then I looked at a different set of reviews, which was much lower than this, and they scored it at 2.5. And I know the reviews are subjective, but still, it's clear that this show is clearly felt a different way by different audiences, and maybe one audience liked it more than the other, and maybe the writers knew that and they had this specific audience in mind when they wrote the show. But what I mean by that will become much clearer in a moment, because I'm going to be telling you my thoughts on this show and trying to explain why I think it got cancelled. But before I get into that, guys, please like this video because it makes a massive difference as to how the video performs in the algorithm. And by the way, a part 2 to brown characters that don't set us back is coming soon, because you guys smashed the like goal on that one. one, so stay tuned. Anyways, I went into this show with an open mind despite seeing the thread and getting a glimpse of the reviews, because I knew that some people clearly liked it, and maybe I might like it as well, you never know. But within the first 10 minutes of the show, and I'm not even joking, it was 10 minutes, this show managed to cover every single annoying stereotype and trope about Indians in TV shows. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it was almost impressive the amount of stuff they fit into just 10 minutes. It was almost like I was watching a 10-minute compilation of Ravi, Baljeet, Jesse, all of those other characters that set us back all in one show. So I feel like for now, I have to break down what I saw in those first 10 minutes before I get into the rest of the show. Now keep in mind, the first 10 minutes of any show is the most important. The way that pilots get screened and how shows get greenlit and how scripts get picked up is based on the first 10 minutes and 10 pages. So the first 10 minutes have to be good and eye-catching. But the first scene starts with the Pradeeps, who are the main family in this show, getting interrogated by 2 American police officers, because surprisingly, this is actually a crime show about a crime that this family allegedly committed. Now there's nothing too annoying about this scene, but one thing I have to pick up on is the fact that obviously these characters have Indian accents, which makes sense because this family has immigrated from India. But the point to note here is that this family is supposed to be Gujarati from Ahmedabad, but a lot of commenters have picked up on the fact that the accents are more South Indian, like Apu's from The Simpsons, and not really Gujarati. But to be honest, I don't think it's that deep, but it's kind of lazy, especially since the guy who made this show is Gujarati, so he probably should know how those accents sound. But during the interrogation, we get a flashback to the family arriving in America, and they pull up to the airport looking like this. Now correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think the average Indian pulling up to another country is wearing cultural clothing or a kurta when they first move. And it's a recurring theme in this show that the characters wear cultural clothing in the most random settings. Now obviously there's nothing wrong with wearing cultural clothes, wear what you want, but this show is trying to represent the average Indian family immigrating to another country, and I guarantee that the majority are not wearing cultural clothing on a daily basis. In fact, apart from weddings or functions, I don't think I've ever seen anyone wearing cultural clothes like that just on a calm day, except maybe some people who decide to wear a kurta or a lenga at prom. Now shout out to you by the way if you did that, only the real ones will know about that one. But I also thought that part was slightly inaccurate and not really representative, but let me know if you've seen something different. Now the next part that annoyed me is this dialogue they have with a TSA officer, because the dad Mahesh just starts preaching and talking about religion out of nowhere to this officer, and the guy is just so extra for no reason. And I get it's supposed to be extra because it's a comedy, but the creator of the show said he wanted to make it relatable, but I don't think he's done that so far. Now when they leave the airport, there's a scene of the family driving, and the dad is driving extra slow for some reason, and he's being extra cautious. Now, I don't know about you, but all the Indians that I know like to rag their cars, but because of his slow driving, the dad gets called a dot head by a white driver in another car. Obviously this refers to the bindi that the dad is wearing. Let's take a moment to decipher this phrase that the writers have clearly made up, because I have never heard the phrase dot head used against anyone. I mean, the only time I've heard anything like that is when rappers will say something like, red dot on his head, turn him Indian. And I can kind of give that a pass because at least there's some wordplay there. But no one has ever used the words dot head before as a way to insult someone. So that's another thing that's inaccurate with this show. And this phrase gets repeated multiple times in different episodes. Now, once they get to their new American home, Banu, who is the daughter in the family, decides to go on a walk. And lo and behold, whilst out on this walk, she falls in love with a white guy. And this white guy called Stu becomes her love interest in the show. Now, I already know that some people are going to be up in arms about this type of thing and are going to crash out in the comments. And I'm sure there's going to be a brown Dr. Umar in there somewhere. But it's a common thing that we see in these shows that brown girls go for white guys. And a lot of people are starting to talk about this online. The most famous example obviously being Devi in Never Have I Ever. I mean, someone said that the 2 characters in this show have that JD and Usha Vance type relationship going on. And honestly, I was dying of laughter when I saw that comment. Now, to an outside eye, why would this be an issue? Why do people in our community see this as a problem? Because at the end of the day, you know, love is a very hard thing to come by. It's very rare to find. And love is love. It doesn't matter who it's with, because genuinely love triumphs over all. And to be honest, that's the view that I hold, and I really don't care that much about this type of relationship. But I think the reason why people would have a problem with this relationship is because it seems to be the only relationship that brown girls can be be in these types of shows. And I know that these relationships do happen in real life, but statistically and probability wise, I don't think it's possible for every time you watch a show involving a brown girl that she's always with a white guy. I mean, why can't we see some Western brown love, or at least some different combinations? I've seen people online theorize that these relationships on TV are apparently used to uphold some form of caste supremacy, or they're used to bring brown men down. Listen, hopefully it's not something as deep as that. To be honest though, I just think that the majority of these writers are lazy and these are like the only relationships that they know how to write. I think what we need to see is more nuance with brown relationships, and we need to see a more accurate depiction of brown people in relationships. And another problem I have with the opening is this one character called Vinod, who is the youngest son, and this guy is literally just Baoji in human form. Like, all of his lines and dialogue are literally just like him. We got the live action version of Baoji before GTA 6. Oh yeah, and there's a joke in here about all brown people being terrorists. And keep in mind guys, this is all within the first 10 minutes. And at this point, a lot of people decided to click off the show based on all the comments that I was reading. And I think you can kind of see why, just because of all the cringe that I've just mentioned. Now, to be honest, even I was tempted to click off at this point as well. But then I wouldn't have enough to talk about for the video. So for the good of journalistic integrity, I decided to stick through it. But I can't lie, I wasn't watching it that thoroughly because I had it open whilst doing some other work in the background. But come on guys, you can't even blame me. The entire runtime of this show is like 3 to 4 hours. And watching the first episode was nearly enough to make me click off. But yeah, I did the Kim K and decided to skim through the rest of the show. And in doing that, I still crashed out and stopped watching at like episode 4 or 5. I can't even remember. But I will say that I picked up on a lot of things and scenes which were just flat out weird in my opinion, and definitely would set us back and need to be called out honestly. And obviously, spoiler warning ahead. Now, one of the things which just irked me about this show is the way in which it tries to lean into stereotypes and tries to make light of them, but then the show also reinforces these same stereotypes. Like, the mother in the show jokes about how she'll make their new white neighbors a pot of curry as a welcome gesture, and this is clearly said in a sarcastic way, but then she actually makes the white neighbors some curry later in the episode. Like, what was the point of the first joke? And then for some reason, the way they talk about and use religion in this show is just very strange. And to be honest, I'm not even religious like that, but it's clear that the writers were just trying to be edgy and funny, but it honestly fell kind of flat. I mean, there's jokes here about Indians worshipping cows. Banu reacts using a religious chant when she first gets on a bus full of white people, even though she's literally in America and she most likely would have seen white people at the airport when she landed, so that scene just makes no sense. Vinod for some reason has this weird obsession with Gandhi, and there's just a whole bunch of things like that which accumulate across the show. I mean, if they rebranded this show as the Indian minstrel show, then I feel like that would have gone over slightly better instead of trying to push the funny and relatable angle. But yeah, this show missed the mark completely in terms of the jokes and how they presented Indians in the show. I mean, plot wise, the story is fine and it's nothing special to be honest, but the show is fun, I guess, to some people. And in terms of who the show is supposed to appeal to, it's clearly not Indians. I don't think this show was made for Indians at all. In fact, if you read a majority of the comments, then they'll tell you this show is clearly made for white people. And I don't even have a problem with that, because clearly some white people enjoyed this show and I did see some positive comments, but clearly they didn't enjoy it enough because the show still got cancelled. So what can we learn from this? Clearly the writer and creator of this show wanted to create one of those early 2000s sitcoms, and based on the trailer, it looked like we were going to get the Indian version of Fresh Off the Boat, which is a classic in the East Asian community, but what we got was basically the TV equivalent of the Raja twins. And I think my biggest problem is they were pushing the comedy and trying to squeeze in as many jokes as possible without actually thinking about overall characters and their stories. I mean, comedy is supposed to be natural, but this felt very forceful to be honest. And maybe my biggest gripe with the show, putting all of the stereotypical stuff aside for a moment, is apparently this show isn't even filmed in Pittsburgh. It's filmed in Toronto based on this one comment I saw. I mean bro, I know I dissed Toronto in the videos, but you had the whole of the 6 at your disposal. They could have actually made a classic like these two shows here, especially with what's going on at the moment. But yeah, I think there was a lack of thought here overall. I mean, there's a reason why a 2000 style comedy doesn't work in 2025, and that's because it's 2025. Like, we're not trying to see the same old ABCD cringe. And I know I don't write shows, so maybe I'm out of my depth reviewing this. Me trying to tell the creators of this show how to make a show is the equivalent of those fat guys who go to the pub and watch football and shout at the TV saying things like, why didn't you make that run, or track back to certain players like Marcus Rashford. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But from our community's perspective, I feel like we should be expecting more from shows. And I'll say it again, we need more brown screenwriters who actually tell stories from our community and stories which are happening in 2025 and not the 1990s. But more of this will be explained in brown brown characters that don't set us back part 2. But what do you guys think? Is this show positive representation for South Asians? Is it negative? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are there any other shows which present the South Asian immigrant experience better? Which other shows do you guys think are good which feature predominantly brown characters? Please share them and let me know in the comment section. Also, please share your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Also, comment any topics or types of videos you guys want to see next, and please like the video to help the video's performance in the YouTube algorithm. And please also subscribe with notifications turned on because I am going to be uploading weekly. Safe.